Hey guys, back with another video for you. So once again, we're going to be looking at Samsung dryer. This will be a little bit different because I'm actually putting a kit into it that I found online. We're going to see if it fixes the issues that this thing's having. So Samsung is very famous for having issues with their heater, which this thing is heating well, so we're not going to bother touching any of that. But it's starting to squeak, and their idlers have been known to be bad, and the rollers. So we got a kit that'll change both the rollers, the idler, and we're going to change the belt at the same time. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so this is the kit here that we have. So I'm just gonna take all this stuff out of here. So we got an idler, which definitely replaced a couple of those. And we got 4 rollers in here. Get those out of there. 4, and we have the belt. So we will put all these on, and hopefully that'll fix this problem. Maybe I'll run it for a minute here and see if we can get it to do what it's doing without it being full of any clothes. Okay, so when you're going to test just about any dryer, what you want to do is put it on a time dry, if that's an option on your dryer, because time dry will heat on high heat, but it won't shut off for 40 minutes. It doesn't matter if the clothes in there are dry or not. So for testing purposes, this is the best one, because any of these other ones are censored and they can just shut off on you while you're trying to test it. So we'll run it on this for a minute and see if we can get it. Oh yeah, it's not sounding great already. Okay, so as always, before we start anything, we want to pull that power cord out so we're not getting electrocuted. So these 2 screws are taken off the back, so you just push straight back and this lid will come off. Make sure you have quite a bit of room around you for this job, because we're going to be taking out everything: the console, the front panel, the drum. Everything's going to come out, and it's a lot of stuff to have out here, so the more room we have, the better. Okay, so that should be a little better for you guys to see. Okay, so we have these little clips up across the top here, so we got to take this console off first. This one, on most Samsung dryers, you just lift up and lift those little tabs out of there. Sometimes you gotta maybe pry on them a little bit, but most of the time you can just pull that right off. Undo the wiring. Should be 1 or 2 wires, and then the whole console just comes right off. We'll put that in the corner. So I'll have to move you guys again, but I usually take this front panel off first, which I think I'll probably do, but I just want to show you while we're here. There's 1 screw here, 1 there, and then 2 just behind this panel. That's why we got to take this front panel off first. But those 4 screws are what removes this piece. There should be another screw right here holding this board assembly to this console piece, I guess. But it's missing, so I know somebody's had this apart before, but whatever, we'll see when we get in there. All right, so just usually 4, sometimes 6. Just Phillips screws. Once these are out, we'll have to take off 2 more screws that are inside the door. Once we get those off, the panel will come forward. The panel kind of sits on some tabs that come out from the bottom. You'll see when I pull this off, but yeah, it just kind of sits in there. So there's these little tabs right here, one there and one there, that are usually pointing up, holding the whole panel on. So you're gonna kind of push those down a little bit before that whole panel will come off. Maybe wait until you've taken the screws off of here. Actually, I'll get you a little closer here so you can see which screws these are. Okay, so we're at the bottom of the door here. So the 2 screws you want to take off is these 2 on the bottom. Don't worry about taking off any of these. They don't need to come off. So just take these guys off. Now, because I've already pushed down those tabs, this whole panel is going to want to fall forward. So I'm just going to hold it here so it doesn't fall on me. Once I get these 2 screws out, I can close the door, and you'll know it's these screws, like if you're putting them back, is they have a big washer on them. None of the other screws have that, so you know that those go right there. So we'll close this door, and then it's not going to want to fall on me anymore. Then we can pull the panel forward. Actually, we go back you guys up a little bit. Okay, so pull the panel forward, and there'll be an electrical connection right behind here. You can't pull it too far out or it'll pull on that electrical connection. So the electrical connection, you just undo that and lift up to pull it off those clips in the bottom there. And you can set that aside. So now it was those 4 screws I talked about earlier to get this guy off. So I'll take those off and show you that in a minute. All right, so take those 4 screws off. Now there's little tabs that fit into slots that are on the frame of this machine, and it just lifts right out of those. Sometimes they can be a little tough. You just gotta kind of wiggle the panel around a little bit. But what you'll find is there's a bunch of little white clips on the back of this panel. You just spin them and take the wiring out of these clips. See, it's just that guy. So you can just give it a twist and wiring will come out of that. Okay, so because we're going to be taking this panel off, we're going to need to get the wiring out of here too. So we'll twist these guys. What we're also going to want to do at this time is disconnect the light. If yours has one, the light will be connected right here. So we'll just disconnect that. It's just a normal plugging pull off. Yeah, disconnect all of these guys. And usually I stick the wiring in beside the machine so it doesn't bug me when I'm trying to take out the drum or put the drum back in. So we'll take this panel off now. There's just going to be 5 screws, so I'll take it back to the front here and we'll show you what we're looking at. All right, so there's 4 screws here. So we'll take those off. Once we get those off, there's one more screw down by the blower assembly, and then an electrical connector that we're gonna have to undo, and then this panel will come out of there. So I'll kind of show you some tricks that I use for taking this panel off, and when we put it back on, a couple tricks for that too, because wow, those are tight. It can be a pain if you're not sure what the heck is going on. I'm going to show you this other screw here. Okay, so the other screw we want to take off is the one that connects the metal duct housing to this plastic duct housing. So this one guy right here, that's all we gotta take off. Don't worry about taking off any of the other ones unless you want to take off this guy and clean inside of it. You can do that too. There's one screw here and one screw there, and then this guy, and this piece will come right off and you can clean it separate from this whole assembly. But as for right now, I just leave this on. It's a lot easier to well, for me anyway, to take it off and put it back on. And before we get too far also, there is an electrical connection right there. You're going to want to take that off because this whole panel's coming off and we don't want to pull that connection out. So maybe I'll get you guys back just a little bit just to show you what's going on here. All right, so now that these 4 screws are off, this one screw down here is off, electrical connector is disconnected. Basically, we're going to take this white panel and lift it up because it sits in little slots on these side panels. So you got to lift it up and then you can pull it out. What you're going to find is the rear roll or the front rollers, which are right here. You can see the bolts sticking out. They're going to get caught on the front lip of the drum. So when you're taking it off, I always lift it out on both sides and then kind of put my hand inside the drum and push it off of the panel. And then the panel usually comes off a little better. Sometimes it doesn't need it, but I found that most of the time that's really helpful. All right, so taking out the drum, I had a little thing in my other video on how to take the belt off, because you got to take the belt off at this point. So we'll disconnect that belt and pull the dryer out. It's really tough to show you because I can barely even get my arms in there to pull it off. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Just got to push back on the idler and then pop that belt off. So the drum, we're not going to need to do anything with it, so we're just going to move it right out of the way. Also try to take it easy a little bit on the drum. Don't throw it around too much because it's aluminum, so it tends to bend fairly easy. Once a drum gets bent, you'll never get it back to completely round again. Okay, so before I start to work on these, I like to give them a good vacuum out because it's a lot easier to take apart things and stuff when it's nice and clean. So I'll run the vacuum through here. What we're going to do now is the rear rollers, which are right there, those blue guys. They're fairly easy. You just got to pop off these little plastic clips. I think that the rollers, just check. Yeah, looks like the rollers that they provided here actually come with the clip, the shaft, and everything on it there. So and we don't even have to worry about pulling those clips off because usually you just pop these clips, take this roller off, and it just makes it a little easier to be able to pull that whole shaft assembly out. Most of the time, if these rollers are making sound, The shaft usually has to be changed because the rollers started to run a little bit lopsided, and it cuts into the shaft, and you can never really sand it so it's straight. So we will start pulling those off. Okay, so we'll start with this left one first because it's actually a little bit easier. On the right one, I tend to actually pull that heater assembly out of the way because it's tough, because the actual nut is on the back of this panel here. So you have to hold that nut with a pair of pliers, however you want to do it, and turn this front piece at the same time. So it gets pretty tough to do. So I just use 2 adjustable wrenches. I've tried different things in the past, and it just seems to work a little better for me. These rear runs are not fun. I'll tell you that. Okay, so there's a couple different styles for these right rear rollers. Some you just have to put your wrench on the back like we did with the other side, but some of them have this piece right here. So you can just turn the front of this, and that will eventually hit the duct assembly and stop that back nut from moving. So you can spin this off, but when you have to go put it all back together, that's where it kind of gets tough, because you have to hold that guy too, and the washer and the nut. So it makes it a little bit tougher to put back on, but a little bit easier to get off. So I'll spin this off and throw that new one on there. Okay, so we're going to put this new assembly on. So we took the washers off the old roller and stuck one on the front like that, because that's where that one goes. So it goes just like that. The front of the machine. So hold that like that. It's tough to line up all 3 of them, but just kind of move them around a little bit, give them a little wiggle. And that's it. Tightening it up, same thing. That little arm will catch and allow you to tighten this without having to hold the nut. Okay, so as those 2 rollers are in there, we can put this heater assembly back in. So, like I said, just line up those 2 little recesses there and push it back. This front piece, I'll show you here, just actually fell into the little slot that's right there. So that's it, and then we put the 1 screw back in the front here, and then it's time to work on that idler. Okay, so we're zoomed in a little close here, but it's like I said, it's tight in here. So this is the idler here, this is the idler wheel. It should spin fairly freely. Like me spinning it, it should keep going, but it just stops like that. That's usually when stuff starts to build up on the shaft. Eventually it will crap out just from that stuff building up on there, but we're going to just change it out since we're in here and we have the part already. So the screw right there, I'm going to undo that, and there's a spring that sits down below there, right there. I don't know if you can see that or not, but, that hooks onto the front little piece here. So we'll just undo this guy, which is just a Phillips. Usually it's fairly tight, but take that off and that either will come off once we take that spring off of it, and we'll put the other one on. So what I like to use here is this little ratchet. You guys might have seen it from other videos, but this is so handy, especially in spots like this where you can't really get in there, and most of the time you can't really even see what the heck's going on, but you do it by feel. So just get this guy. Wow, everything is extremely tight on this guy, so I might have to get me a little more leverage. Just give me a minute here. Okay, so I got that nut, or screw, I guess, loose, so we can take it off. Notice it has that little shoulder to it. You're going to want to make sure that when you put on the new one that sits tight against the idler, because if it doesn't, that idler is not going to be tight and it'll just chatter like crazy in there. Okay, so we'll just put this on with both of the washers on the actual screw, and let's see how that goes, because that should. But when you're bringing it on, you make sure all those washers and the idler cutout hole all actually goes through that hole, which is, trust me, tough to do. So I'll tighten this up and see how we're sitting. Okay, so at this point we have the rear rollers done and the idler done. So I'm going to put the drum back in just because the drum's kind of in the way right now. So I'm going to put it back in just to get it out of the way. And okay, so we're changing the belt too. So while I put the tub back in, I may as well put the belt on. So make sure that the one they send you, before trying to put it on and fighting with it, make sure it's the same size, because I've had it before where they, for some reason, put the wrong size belt in there, and I fought with it for a while, longer than I'd like to admit. But yeah, and it was just silly because it was too big. So anyway, always check that. When you're putting the belt on, the ribbed side has to go against the tub. That'll all make it make sense down where the idler is and where it hooks around to the motor. But yeah, it's always make sure after everything's all said and done, you'll give the drum a couple turns just to make sure that belt's not going to fall off or something like that, because you don't want to put it all back together and find out that the belt wasn't on right. It falls off, so you got to rip it all back apart. But make sure after you've given it a couple spins that belt is, the rib side is facing towards the drum, so you shouldn't be able to actually see the ribs. All right, so got that belt and everything on there, and gave it quite a few turns. It seems all right. Everything seems a little stiffer, but it's going to for a little bit just because everything's so new. So anyway, I'll change these guys exactly like we changed the belt. I see this one here, that's its spin. It barely moves at all. Yeah, seen that way too many times on these guys. What you'll also want, I noticed after I changed that idler, Look on the back right there, that patch of rust, that was rubbing against another piece of metal. So while the idler's running, it's constantly kind of doing this. So the squeak can also be just from that, from the constant moving of those two metals separate from each other. Okay, so those front rollers are on, but I noticed I was just looking through this vent guy here, and it looks actually quite dirty, so I'm going to pull off these two screws, one on each side here, and pull this assembly right off. It just makes it a heck of a lot easier to clean when it's out. And then you'll have to take your lint filter out, which I've already done. I already put it over here. And then this just slides down. And that's it. Then you can get to all that buildup that's inside of there that you don't really want in there. So take the vacuum to that and put this all back together. Okay, got everything all cleaned out. Now it's ready to go back together. So, like I told you guys earlier, I was going to show you just a little trick for getting these on. So what I do is there's a lip on the back of here that the drum will ride on. So I put that into the drum like that, and then lift up and put these, just the top little hangers on where they're supposed to sit on, and then it'll hold itself there. I don't put any screws or nothing in it yet because you'll see why in a sec here, but what you're going to want to do is reach inside and push, just put a little bit of pressure on the front of this panel. Reach inside and slowly turn that drum. You should feel the whole panel assembly move in. That's when you know the front rollers are now caught under the front of the drum, which is where they're supposed to be. Then you can put all of these catches back on, put all your screws in, and you're good to go. Make sure you do up all your wiring connection. All right, so the next piece we're going to put back on is this guy. What I'm going to do first though is hook this wiring back onto these clips. The reason why they have those there is because the wiring is so close to the drum here. If that wiring got enough slack without being in these holders, it could catch on the drum and the drum would rip it right off. So that's why they have these clips. So they're fairly important to put back on. And we can hook up the light right now. We'll leave these other two that'll come through this panel, and this one that'll go to the front door switch. You want to make sure that this is hanging down and doesn't get caught up, because once you screw this whole piece on, if that wiring is stuck up, just for the door switch, these other two should be up, but if that one's stuck up, you have to take this back off because it sits in there so tight that you can't pull the wiring through if it gets caught up top there. So I like to put on this side first. I don't know why, it always seems to go clip in a little easier. So all I do is put screw in here. So it has two of these little tabs here, one there and one there. Both of them have to go all the way in, and don't try to force them in by ramming a screw in or something like that, because you'll just bend it. It's not really that strong of stuff. So now that that's on there, there's a piece or a slot right in the center here. Maybe I'll move you guys a little closer. Okay, so this slot right here, there's a corresponding piece on this panel that should come up through here. So when we get this over here, see how that piece just pops through there? It doesn't come through very much, but you want to make sure that that actually lines up, because that also holds this panel in to the drum where it should be. So what we can do now is I'm going to hook on the wiring to the little catches that are on this piece on the back. And then I'll put these two screws in, and then we can put that front panel on. Okay, so we got all that in place. All the wiring is tied up where it should be. These pieces are coming through here. There was no screw on this board assembly to this panel. So because I work on Samsung so often, I had an extra screw from a kit that I had installed that just gives you extra screws. But I'm going to put that in there. There's two other screws that hold this board assembly in place. So it's not like this is going to fall off and hit the drum or anything like that. But I guess stranger things have probably happened. These screws could possibly rattle loose, and since they're on the same panel, the only thing holding it on would be this guy. So make sure this little tab is on top, and we run a screw through there. So now we'll put that front panel back on. All right, so front panel, just hook the little slots into the catches that are on the bottom of the dryer there. Make sure you do up this wiring connection for the door switch, and then you can push that panel back. So what you'll notice is, since you bent these tabs down to get the panel off, they stayed down. So what I do is I grab a little pick or something and just give them a little bend up, so they're not, the panel doesn't want to just fall on whoever's working on it next. And that way you can put all your screws in and everything without worrying about the panel coming off on you. So I'll put these four back in. Most of the time it should be pretty lined up if everything else has gone together quite nicely, which this dryer has, which is good. Sometimes they're a little bit warped and you got to bend in the panels and stuff to put some of the other panels on, but we didn't have to on this guy, so that's great. Now we'll put those two screws on the inside of the door there. Remember, it's the ones with the big washers on them. Just the two at the bottom here. And we're just about done. We're in the home stretch anyway. That's all that needs to go into there. Now we're going to put the console on. So the console has these little tabs. Those have to fit into corresponding slots that are on this front panel. A lot of times you'll see those tabs get broken. There is 6 of them, and they just get brittle, I think, with the heat. And it's you kind of have to pull forward on the panel to get it off, and those are hooked down, so sometimes they'll just snap right off. But it's all right, as long as you have most of them on there, you're okay. So make sure when you put this in, these line up nicely. It should be fairly flush with the the other panel. If it's not, then you know one of those little hooks are not in place properly, so just pull it forward and re-hook it on, I guess. There's no screws that hold that on. It's just, remember those little clips from the top. So all we got left is these 2 screws for the back, or for the top panel, and that's it. So I'll go ahead and throw these on. Now, if you're testing in somebody's house or something like that, because you're doing this as a job, what I would do usually is just leave this panel off for the moment. Because if for some reason there is something that has went wrong, it's just one less thing that you have to take off. But you'll have to take off the whole everything again, so it's just one less thing to take off. So I'll throw these screws in, we'll plug it in, and we'll give it a test. Okay, so got that top panel back on, so I'm gonna hit that start button and make sure everything sounds good. So everything inside the dryer sounds wonderful, but what I can still hear from behind in that venting is something in there rattling around. So I'm gonna pull the dryer. Actually, I may as well just do it right now. I'm gonna pull, actually, stop this. Turn it off. Pull this forward, and you can take that vent piece off and see what's going on back there. Okay, so what we got here, I'll just move you guys a little bit. You can see that. Try to put my light on here, see if that helps anything. All right, so in most cases there is a clamp right here that holds the venting to the dryer. Sometimes there's a clamp at the wall too. It just depends on how they have done it, but most cases it's a flat blade screwdriver. Sorry, this light is just horrible. Okay, so just a flat blade, and we'll turn this guy out. You don't have to turn it too much, and it just pops off. So I'll just take you a little bit closer here. You can see it's got a little bit of this, looks like rocks. A little bit right here. So I imagine there's a lot more of that in the vent. So sometimes I'll take that vent right off the wall if I figure it's going to be a big plugged up tube, but didn't sound like it was too plugged up. It just sounded like something was rattling in there. So I just kind of tilt this up, see what comes out. If not much comes out, then take a look down there and see if there's anything really. Oh yeah, I can see what's been rattling. Okay, so I'll just stick my hand right here because I can see it turns a 90 up the wall right there. So we have an earplug and maybe a Barbie